O kaola e ke akua, e nana mai kau mau pula pula, e ola kaniko o a haumaka I ole a palalau hala kau I ka pua ne a ne. A laila lawe a kui a ui ke loa ke e. A mama, ua no e. Ina holo hapau mai ka hiki, kumuhana, mai ka piko a wake a hiki kai ho honu o Kanaloa. E no mako, na pula polo o ke aina kaulana o Hawaii nei. Welcome, our families, my brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers who join us, my cousins who are tuning in, strangers, wherever you may be in this world. Mahalo for joining us this evening as we celebrate with another event, a very special holiday for the Hawaiian Kingdom, that is Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea, the restoration of Hawaiian sovereignty, the restoration of Hawaiian life, Hawaiian breath, Hawaiian right to rule, and the rising of our people as a collective. So tonight, we are very proud to be spending this evening with some very special people. And we're going to have a chance to meet them in a few moments. My name, however, is Imai Kalani Winchester. I'm associated with Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea. I'm one of the many organizers, both here in Hawaii, as well as organizers who are celebrating the independence celebration around the world. We have come as a coalition united in solidarity to raise our high Hawaii, to raise our consciousness, to raise the voice of our people, and to raise our collective aspirations. On July 31st, 1843, July 31st, 1843 is one of the most important dates that we as Kanaka need to remember and put into our na'au. During the reign of Kauikeoli Kamehameʻekolu, there was a short and temporary altercation between a man by the name of Lord George Paulet, and on behalf of the British Crown, for whom he represented, in cahoots with a man named Richard Charlton over a property dispute. Many of us already know the story here. Several demands are made of the young king. As a king would, he weighed his options for this assertion from the British to claim these lands, and the king stood firm and he said, no, a'ole. And because of this, Lord George Paulet pointed his guns at Honolulu and demanded that the king surrender his ea. A civilized man, an educated man, Kauikeoli, looked upon the scene and he witnessed that his young nation, faced with many imperial pressures, including the devastating depopulation brought by foreign diseases, which is an issue that we're going to be able to cover, I believe, this evening. Needed to look at the welfare of his people, needed to see how he would keep his people safe, how he would keep his aina safe. And Kauikeoli, for many of us who study history, understand that he took many innovative means to protect our ea, our sovereignty, our right over our land. A letter was written to Queen Victoria, Her Royal Majesty, and she immediately, upon receiving news of this unrighteous act here in Hawaii, she immediately sends Pacific Commander Admiral Richard Darton Thomas immediately to Honolulu to settle this situation. And when he arrives, he meets first with Lord George Paulet and questions Lord Paulet about his motives. Once he establishes this great hewa, this great injustice, he dismisses Lord George Paulet. He then meets with Kauikeoli Kamehameʻekolu in a private session, and he formally apologizes on behalf of the Queen, on behalf of Great Britain, for this transgression against a friendly nation. So, in a small ceremony, well, I want to say small, in a very large ceremony, attended by thousands of Hawaiian subjects, Richard Thomas would right this incredible wrong, and he would do so by lowering the Union Jack, which for 5 months had replaced all Hawaiian flags throughout the entire kingdom, which are collected and burned. And for 5 months, the Union Jack flew over Hawaii. So in a ceremony, Admiral Richard Thomas lowers the Union Jack and he raises High Hawaii, High Aloha. In this ceremony, there are thousands of people in attendance. Cannons are going off. A great celebration is had. And first is uttered the words, Hoʻihoʻi Ea, o ka ʻāina I ka pono. Many of us in Hawaii who know about Hawaii have maybe heard this song, heard this saying in songs. Maybe you've seen it on a few other of our commodified or otherwise appropriated state agencies. However, Hoʻihoʻi Ea o ka ʻāina I ka pono is a very critical and important part of our evidence as a nation. And it's in this spirit that we want to raise the consciousness to this important holiday, July 31st, 1843, as the day that sovereignty, that Ea was returned to Hawaii. Now, in 1893, most of us also understand that there was another great wrong that was done by the Americans. United States of America enacted a similar occupation, and Liliuokalani, being an astute student of history, also celebrated Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea as a child. You can read about her childhood, and you'll see some of the celebrations that her and her brother Kalakaua took part in. Now, as a part of her political strategy, she also, like Kauka Kekuni did, needed to look at the landscape, and she saw that justice, pono, was honored by the British. And so she believed in the treaty, she believed in the laws, and she believed in the righteousness of this Christian nation for which she was. And she felt that if she were to follow the course of Kauka Kekuni Kamehameha Kolu, we would likewise have a Hoʻihoʻi Ea again. And so today, over 100 years later, after the illegal overthrow and occupation of our kingdom, the Kanaka Maoli people, led by our honoree tonight, who we'll be talking about quite a bit, Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, as well as many of our Kanaka Maoli patriots, some of which have born children to some of our panelists today, gathered people again at Thomas Square, reclaimed, resuscitated, restored this celebration, this idea that the suffocation, the extinguishment, the extermination of our history was a part and parcel of the degradation of our health, the degradation of our political situation, the degradation of our language. They were all connected to this colonial aspiration. Imperialism is what we call it. And so Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, along with many patriots in 1986, began the reinstitution of Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea as a Hawaiian national celebration. Today, over many years later, we are on that second generation of leaders who have taken on the responsibility to carry on this sacred duty. And behind me, you're going to see many of the people, many of the heroes, many of the me'e who we've honored in the past, and there'll be many more to come. And we take the time to, in July, to again raise the level of consciousness about our history and to raise these names as well. So you can see not only Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell right in the center, the Pico, but you can also see Papa Soli Nīheu, and we're very happy to have Papa Soli's daughter with us, Kalama. We're also very happy to have Papa Kekuni's daughter, Nālani, also here with us today, and we'll introduce her in a second. But you can also see the firebrand, Dr. Hanani K. Trask. You can see Judy Napoleon from Moloka Inuia Hina. You can see Puhi Pau, Kamanaʻopono, which provided us that intro video, which is awesome. You can also see to my side, Imai Kalani, Kala Hale, the poet, Snake. You also see Auntie Moani Keala Akaka. Many of you who have seen her recently, she has passed away, defending Mauna Kea. You can also see from Kauai, Auntie Puanani Rogers, Aloha Auntie Pua. We also got to see Kawai Puna Prijin in that video, I believe, looking young. Kawai Puna is noted as being one of the sharpest Kanaka intellects to have ever graced our lāhui, and is responsible, like many of these me'e that we celebrate, for Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea, for raising that consciousness in us. We also have, again, Mr. Palani Van, whose music, whose message, whose historical accounts of our people and our future have been critical to the redevelopment, the reestablishment of our consciousness as a people. And with the reestablishment, with the reclamation, the remembering of who we are, we grow our power, we grow our Ea. So I'm very happy today to be spending tonight at Hale Kaohinani once again. Thursday night, Hawaii. For those of you guys who have been there, those of you guys who remember the emails, those of you guys whose name are still subscribed on top of Uncle's sign-in sheet, those of you guys who have taken pictures in the living rooms, those of you guys who have all of those rich and memories, we hope that you guys will be able to share some of that in our chat and some of our Facebook live feeds. We'd love to hear what you guys remember. This is a night dedicated to Uncle Kekuni Blaisdell, Kauka, Doctor, Papa, Uncle, leader, inspiration, mentor, patriot. And so tonight, we're very happy on behalf of Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea to join with Papa Ola Lokahi, who Papa Kekuni also helped to found. So we're very happy to continue this relationship with these medical professionals who have been inspired by Dr. Blaisdell's work, his life commitment. We're very happy to be sponsored and have the support of Hawaii People's Fund for putting out all of our great content throughout the month of July. We have a few other people I know I'm gonna forget to Mahalo, but we still have a whole a night to mention their names too. So we want to get right to it. I want to pass the microphone over to Kim Ku'ule Bernie. Maybe you guys know her from her work on Koho'olawe, which is where I first got a chance to meet her. But she's here representing Papa Ola Lokahi and is going to give us a quick introduction to everybody tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Mahalo nui, Imai. Aloha mai kako. Indeed, this is going to be a very quick introduction because Imai has said everything. It is our honor and our pleasure on behalf of Papa Ola Lokahi and Ahahui o Kauka, the Association of Native Hawaiian Physicians, to be able to honor Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, Kekuni to almost everybody, and really to reflect on the intersection of his vision to restore the nationhood, to revive La Hoʻihoʻi Ea, and his work in Hawaiian health and well-being. So this is the first of two series of 2 episodes, Thursday nights at Hale Kaohinani, that will do that. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Martina Kamaka, who will be your moderator for the evening. Mahalo nui for the opportunity to partner with you, Imai and Noi and everybody at La Hoʻihoʻi Ea.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Martina Kamaka. I'll be your moderator. I'm a family physician and a student of Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell when I was at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce this really esteemed panel that we have tonight. And just to remind you that we'll try to have some time at the end for question and answers. So please feel free to send your questions through the chat. But we will have some questions for the panelists to start off with. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Noah Emmett Aluli. He's one of 5 Native Hawaiian physicians who graduated in the first 4-year graduating class of the medical school at JAPSOM, John A. Burns School of Medicine, and that's where he first met Kekuni. He is also a member of the Kaho'olawe 9, who comprised the first landing on the island in 1976 in protest of military occupation and abuse of the island. He's a founding member of Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, Nā Pu'uwai, Ahahui o Kauka, and many other pioneering groups. Dr. Aluli is a family physician on the island of Moloka'i for over 40 years. Our second guest is Kekuni's daughter, Dr. Nālani Blaisdell-Brennan. She's the daughter, as I said, of Kekuni and learned his philosophy at an early age. She's a graduate of Harvard University, the John A. Burns School of Medicine, and the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. She's also received a certificate in Maori studies at the University of Auckland in New Zealand as a Rotary International Graduate Fellow. Currently, she's on the board of Ahahui o Kauka and a staff physician at the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center. Our third panelist is Dr. Kamanaʻopono, who is the current CEO of the Kohala Institute. He is a clinical psychologist who got his master's and PhD at the University of Hawaii in clinical psychology. Prior to his current job at the Kohala Institute, he was the research director for 2 years and the CEO for over 7 years at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. He's active as a cultural practitioner and also involved with the Ahakane movement. And our final panelist for this evening is Dr. Kalamaokaʻāina Nīheu. She's the co-founder of the Mauna Medic Healers Hui and the Standing Rock Medic Healers Council, as well as a coordinator for Justice for Fallen Elders Coalition. She is the Associate Medical Director for COVID Response Team and the Pinole and Lifelong Medical Care. So these are our 4 panelists. Really excited to have you here. And the very first question that I want to put out to you is, what is your favorite memory of Kekuni? Okay, I know you guys all have it. So do I need to call on you or are you going to volunteer?
We should go with the kupuna, Emmett. You gotta unmute, Emmett.
My favorite memory was with Kekuni was way before medical school, and he was a contemporary of my mother's youngest brother, Dr. Abraham Cockett, who was chief of urology at University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. And they were contemporaries from Kamehameha schools. And the two are probably the most published Hawaiian medical physicians in their research initially on. And so he kind of was a person that interested me to get into medical school. Dr. Kekuni really established the program that is now Imi Ho'ola at John A. Burns School of Medicine. So there were 5 of us Hawaiians who were in the first class. And now, according to our register, the Kauka register, there are about 290 Hawaiian physicians. And we credit all Kekuni's work for the medical school, for us, and for kind of like encouraging and modeling our work in medical school and in our practices. Mahalo.
Okay, I'm going to pick on Kamanaʻo since he volunteered Emmett.
Great, great, thank you.
Mahalo, Martina, and Vilina mai ke aloha kuiaka pau e nā hoa makamaka I keia po no keia remembrance of Kekuni, a beloved man and patriot of our lāhui. My favorite memory, I always remember this, is I believe it was Hoʻihoʻi Ea that was down at Iolani Palace. And then I got a call. I was hanging out with Uncle Maka. And all I knew was that Maka told me, he said, hey, Kekuni will call us down for the Iolani Palace. We go down. We're going to do some stuff. So I said, oh, okay, we go. And then when we got there, you know how Kekuni would always welcome everybody like, oh, it's naka, hele mai, aloha mai kako, oh, naka. And then I said, hey, Kekuni, and then we maka. And then he looks to Maka and he tells Maka, you guys ready? And then Maka goes, yes, Kekuni, we ready. And I'm standing next to Maka looking like, what we going to do, you know? And the next thing you know, he goes, come on now, we're going to do Ava ceremony. You can chant. I was like, what? we're going all these people over here. Like, why you never tell me we was going to do our ceremony, you know? But what was really good about that memory for me was that how I saw Kekuni in a way like a kaka'olelo, and really talking about our kingdom and the transgressions and our history, and really inspiring our people to, in a way, to become more enlightened. And through the Awa ceremony was everyone's sort of commitment to carry the banner and carry the mo'olelo, and in a way inspired us to continue to fight, but in a way to advocate, because he really believed that the health and well-being of our people was definitely connected to our historical past and the transgressions of the loss of our ea. And then when I look at you know, all these models today in the 21st century about social determinants of health, way back when in the early 90s when I was reading Kekuni's material, it was like he was the trailblazer before anybody even coined social determinants of health. So he definitely recognized how the political factor and government led to or contributed to the lack of health and well-being, and in order for ultimate health and well-being is eventually a reconciliation of our self-determination, sovereignty, and independence. But I can never get that out of my mind about that meeting with us three. And there must have been about like 30, 40 people. And I was just like, wow, we just going to do this right now. So, but we had Ava, and it was at the Ahahui, and it was a beautiful day. So that's my best memory of Kekuni back then. Mahalo.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. So I'm going to ask Kalama to share her favorite memory of Kekuni.
This was a really hard one for me. I think it's probably hard for everybody. I think there's just so many incredible memories. I mean, like being around Papa Kekuni was like being around a walking memory machine. You know, like the number of experiences that I had with him were just infinite, and it's like I remember writing down like 20 different ones, and so I think one of the ones that I actually settled on maybe a little bit unusual, and the memory that sticks out the most for me is when he was arrested protesting the striker brigade. And I'm going to explain a little bit about why this was. And I have so many deep and intimate memories of him. But this was something that I was, you know, standing apart from. I wasn't a part of what was happening, in the sense of like, I wasn't in the middle of the action. He wasn't talking directly to me. It wasn't an intimate moment. It was very public. There were police around. There was a protest. We're trying to stop the destruction of our Aina. And we had a group of people there that were really at the front lines, and they were like those people who know Kauka Kekuni. We had Papa Kekuni, we had my mom, and they were there trying to bring their signs in, and they wouldn't let them. And I had gone through this, you know, this experience of growing up with him, looking at him like one of the uncles. I genuinely thought, I grew up with people like with Puhipao and Papa Kekuni, and, you know, all the people in the picture. And I thought that's what regular people were like. And I didn't realize that they were just so extraordinary. And so as I became an adult, I realized, you know, all the incredible things he did. And it was just like blowing my mind. That part of it was blowing my mind. And then here we are in the situation where they're treating somebody that I consider to be one of the most revered people I have in my life as not somebody that was worthy of respect. And yet here he was with all the accomplishments that he did, and he chose to stand in this way. He chose to sacrifice himself in a way that to fight for all of us. And before I had never grown up thinking I could be a doctor. And it was at that moment, seeing this person that I had looked at in so many different iterations, realizing that I wanted to be a warrior healer and realizing that I could be.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to give the person that probably has the hardest time answering this question. As she shared a lifetime with her father, I'm going to ask Kekuni's daughter, Nālani, to answer that question as best as she can. You're muted, Nālani.
Delina Mai. Thank you, Martina, Papa Ola Lokahi, Hoʻihoʻi Ea, and my Kauka, Martina, and Emmett for putting this together. It's very humbling to be here. Yes, as a child of Kekuni, many might not know that my brother and I grew up being drilled in the Hawaiian language. Every morning on the way to school, my father had index cards and he would read off of them and we had to respond appropriately. So he'd say, "He ni no ka'u," and we had to say, "Ai hako make make." And then he would, whatever, ask questions about whatever he was curious about that day or whatever he wanted us to learn that day. He also taught us in these daily car rides to never forget that the most important thing was to be Hawaiian. And when I asked him one day, "Papa, why do you say that?" He said, "You don't understand. When I was growing up, people would say things like lazy Kanaka or dumb Hawaiian. And I want you to know that that's never been true. And it's up to you to always be proud that you're Hawaiian and show everyone that that's not true." Other memories are of the Hawaiian Kauka, for instance, Emmett coming to our home. And then later, Kalama's father, Uncle Sali Nīheu, would come over along with Kamanaʻopono. And most of the people that you see right behind Imai. Like Kalama, I thought every house was like this. I thought every house had a weekly gathering of Hawaiians who were eager and knew the Hawaiian history and questioned authority. I don't know if it's a good thing that I learned to question authority, thinking back on my life, but I did think that everybody was like that. Most importantly, I think the lesson I learned was that Papa loved everybody. And as Kamanaʻo said, every Hawaiian he would greet as though he was so delighted to see you, as though this was the first time he was seeing you, or though you hadn't seen you for the longest time. And it was a warm welcome. It was a honi. It was, "Oh, kanaka ikaika, oh." And I think that's something that will always, always stick with me. After Papa died, people came up to me and said, "Your dad brought me food and Hawaiian food in prison." And when I asked him why, he said, "Because we're all ohana." And someone else said, "Dad posted my bail." And when he asked why, Papa just said, "Because we're ohana." And I think that's another thing that was really important about Papa, was that he viewed all of us as ohana, all of us as descendants of Papa and Wakea and Haloa. And it just delights me today to hear Imai Kalani just recite, or Imai Winchester recite the history of Hoʻihoʻi Ea, because I was there at the first one, and I'm so impressed that Imai has carried the torch and knows the entire history. So that's just a little bit of some of the memories that we can say out loud.
Okay, thank you. These are great stories. Thank you everyone for sharing. Now, my encounters with Kekuni have really been in the world of medicine. He's such a large figure in so many different worlds, but so I'm going to shift a little bit toward that sort of health medicine realm. And for me, I really want to share with you 5 lessons that Kekuni always shared with all the medical students. And that's going to be a segue into our next question. So his 5 principles, I have this card on my desk. It says the 5 principles of Chairman Blaisdell. So he was the chairman of the Department of Internal Medicine, first one. And so on this little card, there are these 5 principles. Number 1, the patient comes first. Number 2, bring science to the bedside. Number 3, doctor means teacher. Number 4, Hawaii, Kaohinani, is a very special place. And number 5, have fun. So what I would like to ask this esteemed panel of doctors is, what do you think some of Kekuni's lessons for us as doctors? Okay, Emmett, I think you're muted again.
Okay. So when I addressed this year's graduating Hawaiian Physicians Johnny Brennan School of Medicine, I added a 6th lesson that I know is Kekuni's message to us. Doctors are leaders. We're leaders. We got to get out there. And so I just reflect upon his work with the nuclear-free and independent Pacific, and how he traveled the Pacific. He was cared for, especially by the Maori in Aotearoa. I mean, he and Soli just really kind of like made the rounds. They're just looking at the tribunal issues and the independence issues and the loss of our kingdom. I mean, he was such a leader there. And so I think about all of us having to assume some of that leadership role to kind of like improve upon the healthcare ourselves as Hawaiian physicians, improving upon the healthcare of our communities, of our families. I know for sure that was Kekuni's message to us. So with all the 5 principles, adding the 6th, we're leaders, we go for it. Mahalo.
I love that addition, Emmett. I'm going to write it on that little card above my desk. So thank you. Should we just continue in the same order, or does somebody want to go next? Or so the question again, you know, we talked about doctor as teacher, and what do you think some of his lessons for us are? And Uncle Emmett talked about leadership in that important role. So somebody like to go next?
Yeah, I'll go, Martina.
Okay.
I always looked because I was not a physician or in medical school. I was in the Department of Psychology, and there were no Hawaiian faculty, and we had very little role models. And so early on, it probably was about like 1991, 92. I came across Kekuni, and the reason why I came across him is because he wrote an article on Kahuna La'au, and that is what first drew me to him and his work, not only in medicine, but he was very knowledgeable of Kahuna practices. And as a young graduate student, I spent many years researching on Kahuna, especially in the healing arts. And you know that when you talk about his principle as Kauka, as teachers, to me, he was the consummate kumu, you know. He was constantly teaching, and he had a great humility when he shared, whether he had an audience of 50 or it was just me and him talking and sharing. And he always talked about the greatness in terms of the knowledge of our kupuna, of what they had, but also bringing that forward and understanding the realities of modern day Hawaii and being able to excel in the Western world and academia. And like Nālani had shared, he was constant, like, never let anyone tell you you cannot. And he was always the one, in a way, like a lama kukui, and even like what Kalama had shared, he was the torchbearer or example, at least for me, that was no matter what barriers were there, you can excel, and as long as you ho'omau, you're determined and you pursue it and you do it with aloha. He like Nālani said, he had much aloha. You know, sometimes I'm not as aloha as him, but I think he was a great model in that as a teacher, and that really, for me, he was like a bridge, you know, between the past and modern medicine, and he did it seamlessly. You know, he had achieved so much, as Emmett has shared, and contributed to the UH School of Medicine. And I believe he was the first chair, Nālani, at the School of Medicine. So, you know, he really was a trailblazer, but he was very ha'aha on who he met and what he taught. And so, to me, I still carry that with me because of Kekuni.
Okay, Kalama, thank you, Kamana'o. So I'm going to ask Kalama now if she has any lessons, Kekuni's lessons for us that she can share.
I think, you know, in the vein Dr. Aluli, I think I'd like to add one more as far as the basic lesson. That is that, you know, the core lessons that I feel like he was teaching us is that, you know, on the opposite side of the coin, but also very much a part of it, is that Kauka are servants to the people. We are there to be servants to the people. What is science if we do not bring our people along? What is culture if it alienates our people and leaves them behind? What is advancement if it causes destruction of our planet? So, you know, I think one of the things I grew up with him as being, you know, very sweet, you know, that, oh, Kanaka, but then I got into medical school and he got very different. I think it was his way, I think, looking back at it, his way of saying that you are entering into this realm where you are to be a servant to the people. And you have to take this really, really seriously. And he was I think he was the toughest, most strict, most hardcore teacher I've ever had. He would ask me to do things that I would be like, my mind would be blown, but he would not be afraid to do it himself. So to be a servant to the people, I think is one of his, you know, one of his very enduring lessons, because, you know, often in Western world, you know, doctors are considered to be like gods or like people above everyone else. And to me, I think he taught me that's poho. If you don't walk with the people and be with the people, if you are not one with the people, then you've lost what it means to be Kanaka.
Thank you. Thank you, Kalama. Nālani, gonna have you end out this round of questioning here.
Is my microphone on?
Yes, it is.
I'll underscore what the others have said. The patient comes first. We would answer the phone, Dr. Blaisdell's residence, and he would say, "Oh, this is Kekuni. How may I help you?" So everything was about service to others. He taught me that service to others was the greatest good, and a responsible teacher favored logic over emotion. One of his favorite sayings was to quote Sir William Osler and say equanimitas. He wanted us to be even. Being a teacher, data. He relied on research to underscore his teaching. He never made stuff up. He was a copious reader. and everything he said was footnoted. As far as Kamanaʻopono is a special place, he would say in his writings and in person, it is our homeland, and it is the only homeland for our people. Other people have perhaps another home in Asia or another home on the continent, but it is our homeland, the only homeland for Kanaka Maoli, and he wanted us to feel ownership for our land and culture. He stressed the accurate use of words. He taught that the correct word for Hawaiian, which had, the word Hawaiian had been coined by outsiders, was Kanaka Maoli, and he found in the literature that in 1809, an English writer, Archibald Campbell, who lived with Kamehameha the Great's compound, wrote, there are two classes, the I'i or the Kanaka Maori or people. Kanaka Maoli is Tangata Maori in Aotearoa and Ta'ata Maohi in Tahiti. He taught that we were a strong, robust people numbering between 800,000 and 1 million in 1778. And most importantly, he taught that cultural conflict or dilution, losing our language, our aina, our philosophy, and our way of life had a direct connection to Kanaka Maoli's high rates of heart disease, stroke, and diabetes, to our short life expectancy and risk factors such as tobacco, alcohol, and diabetes. So going along with Kalama and Imai have said, he believed there was a direct connection between taking away the loss of our culture and the decline in Native Hawaiian health. And again, he used research and science to underline that point. And then, as Dr. Aluli said, he wanted us all to become leaders and teachers and to move the way forward.
Thank you. Emmett, you just waved. Did you want to add something to those wonderful words? Nope, you're good. Okay, thank you. You know, I can say that he, just from a medical student perspective, I shared a lot of what Kalama shared, you know, of him really holding us to very high standards. And I think that's because he expected a lot of us. And I can't say that he ever pushed any of us beyond what we were able to do. He really, that was another gift he had, was inspiring you to be a better person and to achieve more than you would have ever thought if he didn't kind of give you that nudge. And thank you for expounding on those lessons to you know, Nālani and Kalama and Emmett. And I'm definitely gonna rewrite it. I'll footnote it, and I'll make sure that I say that that it's approved by Nālani. Okay, is that okay? Thank you. So I know we only have a little bit of time left, and I want to at least spend a little bit of time in that other world that was such a huge part of Kekuni's life, which is his love for the lāhui and for change that needed to happen in our lāhui. So my last question to you is going to frame it in sort of his vision. You know, what do you think his lessons were? What was his vision for our lāhui and the lessons for our lāhui that he advocated for? So this is a little tough one. I'm kind of wrapping a big thing into these two questions, but let's look at sort of that broader lāhui perspective and his vision and his message to our people.
You going to start with me again?
I guess so, Emmett. Sorry.
No. Hard being a kupuna and being the unconditional aloha for everybody that Kekuni had. So I guess for the lāhui, after he came on an axis with the Kauka hui, it was so proud to kind of like serve him his first ava. But the other thing is the lessons that I learned from him was, you know, as we went to Washington, D.C. and established the Native Hawaiian healthcare systems, and as we started organizing the kupuna la'au lapa'au la'au kahea, especially beginning in Hana with the Kekuni. And he was so supportive of our research, especially on Molokai. In 1985, we did the Molokai Heart Study, and in 1987, we did Hoʻihoʻi Ea, the Molokai Diet Study, and then over the years to follow, we did Hua Kanavau Kaliko, our generation study of heart health. And he was so inspiring and encouraging as attending many meetings in doing the community participatory research and having the community conduct these high-powered researches and you know, and editing our papers was so important for us. So for me, you know, he was in our lāhui, we got to not only take care of our own communities, our families, but we got to do our own research. We got to do it in our style. And so me, that was the kind of like the key lessons, encouragement. I mean, he was always kind of like introducing me as, you know, this guy stopped the bombing of Kola, and he stopped the, you know, he returned this island to our nation. But, you know, the issues, the key lessons,
Oh. Emmett, you're on mute. Sorry. Can we unmute him?
oh, so
Yeah,
I
there you
didn't
go.
say anything.
Yeah, if you could repeat maybe the last 2 minutes. Sorry, Emmett.
I don't know how I was. Okay, so I'm going back to Koalapi and how.
Oh,
Hello.
hi, Emmett. We got you. Yeah.
I was just going through how he encouraged us on Koalapi, how we established the Native Hawaiian healthcare systems, and he kind of like programmed all that. That's a lesson. How he reached out to everybody, make sure everything was okay. How we restarted our research in on Molokai, and how he was part of the advisory board, or that just was just so great to kind of like have them as we looked at the community-based research that we did on Molokai on 3 different publications, and how we first went with Kekuni and his wife and Tuhana to begin organizing the La'au Lapa'au practitioners. I mean, that's the key lessons and how we was able to support all us guys to kind of move on and for the lāhui. Okay, sorry.
No, that's good. So Emmett, I think what I heard you were just sharing that, you know, he, for him, the lessons for our lāhui is really to take care of each other, take care of our communities, and to not be afraid to go out and get our own data and own our data, because there is power in data, right? And that can influence policies, influence politics, and everything. And that he played multiple roles in supporting our communities, and not just through medicine, but in as many other ways as he could. So did I get that? Did I summarize that about? Catch it?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Mahalo. I know it got cut up a bit. So, okay. Mahalo, Emmett. And how about you, Kamanaʻopono? I guess we'll just keep the same order. Okay.
What I want to share was that Kekuni was part of my dissertation committee, And my chair at the time, usually you only have one outside committee person outside of the department, but I insisted on the other one was Noreen Mokwao from School of Social Work in Kekuni. And Kekuni commanded so much respect in academia at UH. The department approved of it because of his work on Hawaiian health, Kanaka Maoli health and well-being. But my research was the development of a measurement on Hawaiian cultural practice and how that impacted Hawaiian identity, and was to be used to look at health. Statistical analysis we did was factor analysis. And then what it does is it clumps these items together. And so I brought the data to the committee, and we were trying to figure out what it was. And you got to understand it, like in psychology, like they're not really touchy-feely people, but Kekuni was brilliant in the sense that he had described this group or clustering of items as Hawaiian spirituality. And what he did was he used that famous slide of Napiko Ola, because my other members couldn't get it, like quite understand, like, how is this related to an individual's like identity? And so he had talked about, the piko kepo, or the traversing of one's spirit through the manava of your po'o when you sleep, and your connection to the ancestor. That's the conduit, the portal of how we connect back spiritually. We talk, we dream, they guide us. And so he was being the consummate teacher to the committee. And then he had talked about, our connection as Kanaka Maoli individually through our birth and through our piko to our biological parents. And the importance of mo'okuauhau and genealogy in defining who we are. And then lastly, the piko o kama'i, and our legacy through procreation. Yes, that's it. That's exactly it. And what he talked about was how it was very important for Native Hawaiians, not just because of our health, but ho'olu lāhui, to go forth and prosper by regenerating a healthy nation through good health and well-being. And in that way, you perpetuate the legacy of our kupuna, and always sort of remembering the ancestors in that realm of po. I always remember about Kekuni. So a lot of the work, in a way, we travel the footsteps of our ancestors, and he used this exact slide to articulate it, and it was great to see him share that, and being able to bring culture into sort of statistics and science, but he was able to articulate it so well about the challenges we were facing as a people. But in a way, his message and legacy for me was never forget these connections, because they define who we are, who we were in the past, who we are now, and will always forever define our future, So, mahalo.
Thank you, Kamanao. I do remember every time I heard Kekuni speak, whenever I had him speak with students or with faculty, he always talked about the people, he always talked about the connections, he was always educating. I think that's really important. And I think that other thing somebody had mentioned earlier, that bridge between traditional knowledge and Western knowledge, and really that intertwining and the importance of both in our path towards being a truly healthy people, healthy, thriving people. So thank you for that. Kalama, well, first of all, I want to just be respectful of my panelists. I realize that it's now 8 o'clock, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to stay on a little longer. We haven't heard from, I'd love to hear from Nālani still in Kalama on this last question. And then I'm sure that some of you may have some questions that from people that are observing, that they may have some questions that we could answer if you don't mind staying. And if you have to leave, we understand, but I'm hoping that you'll indulge us a little bit with a little bit more of your time. So mahalo. Okay.
So, are we fulfilling Papa Kekuni's vision for a thriving lāhui? And I think yes and no. In spite of all the work, in spite of all the great vision, in spite of like all of these innovations, we're still #1 with all the worst statistics. We're still struggling in our own homeland. We're still the #1 in incarceration rates and our healthcare rates. We know more and in greater and finer detail about how our history has traumatized us. We're better, we're stronger, we know our olelo. We are able to speak for ourselves and we have a voice on the international stage, but our most vulnerable are still so incredibly vulnerable. And at these times, I think to myself, you know, I just want to cry because there was so much more work, and, you know, he was with us for a good time, but it just wasn't enough. It didn't feel long enough because, like, sometimes I cry and I think, I miss him. How can I possibly be as hopeful, as visionary, and as brilliant? And then I take a step back and I think, you know, what would Papa Kekuni say? He'd be like, gotta do it. Gotta do it. Yes, you are Kanaka. And I just take a minute and I just get a grip. And I say, yes, we are fulfilling his vision. Because Papa Kekuni would always see us in greatness. He always would see us in greatness. Not at the little mina things, not at the things we haven't succeeded at, but the things that we will succeed at. And we can't complain and we can't just lie and cry and moan about the fact that he's not here. We have to celebrate the fact that he laid out this great Hale, this pathway. He cleared a pathway so that we may then walk this pathway to then clear it on for others. He started this journey, and it is our responsibility, our kuleana, and our privilege to make sure that our people are not #1 in those statistics anymore. That not only do we have people at the highest levels of government and the highest levels of academia, but then we are there to reach out a hand to those of us who are the most vulnerable. We will bring our whole lāhui with us. And I really believe that the only thing he would expect from us is to rise.
Thank you, Kalama, for those. Wow, this is really inspirational words. You make me feel really emotional there too. You know, we didn't talk about Kekuni's role in the Olamau study of the late 80s. You know, that's the first time a lot of people really even opened their eyes to the fact that we had these huge health disparities. And then I've been involved and Emmett as well in the new version of the Olamau study. And you're right, in some respects, we haven't made a lot of progress, but I'm really glad you ended with what you did, because we have in many other ways with our language, with the speaking up, with the energy in that generation behind us to make a difference and change. And I think, you know, and I just want to thank you for those inspirational words and reminding, because you're right. He would still be expecting greatness from all of us and expecting us to rise. And I know in his heart, he knew that we could do it. We just had to all work together. So thank you for that, Kalama. It was really heartfelt words. Thank you. Nālani, I'm sure you've got some great thoughts on this question and things to share with us as well.
Thank you, Kalama and Kamanaʻopono and Dr. Aluli for your remarks. I asked Joanne Sark to forward some of my father's writings, and he was almost prescient in discussing the role of capitalism and over-reliance in tourism, leading to overcrowding. He discussed epidemics and how they had affected our people. His key lessons, I think, would have been, and I'm quoting him now, we protect, conserve, preserve, and sustain and restore our la'a, sacred environment, for our hanauna, generations to come. Because Papa and Wake are living, and we are their descendants through Haloa, and we are connected to everything living, conscious and communicating. We are ohana with mauna, kai, wai, makani, ua, aina, and wahipano, all of nature. We reject colonialism, capitalism, and degradation of our lands, water, and atmosphere. We build mana by developing skills such as master navigator, productive fisherman, talented chanter, or effective healer. We also build our self-responsibility and self-discipline through personal hygiene and keep our mana pono. He quoted Pokui in saying, we care for our na'au, kino, uhane, and wailua. So are we fulfilling his vision? Eola Mau is a wonderful example of fulfilling that vision. Number two, something you, Martina, and Dr. Aluli have talked about, one of his goals was to increase the number of Native Hawaiian doctors. However, currently at about 300, or as Dr. Aluli said, 296 Kanaka Maoli MD, we have 300,000 people. So that's one kauka for every 1,000 in our lāhui. So we have more work to do. In the School of Medicine, fantastic strides have been made under Dean Rogers, actually first, and now Dean Hedges and Keawe Kaholakula. In 1967, the first class was admitted non-Kanaka Maoli. In 1963, the medical school began to recruit Kanaka Maoli. And then kudos to Dr. Ben Young and Dr. Winona Lee. In 1990, the Native Hawaiian Center of Excellence was founded. In 1978, the UH School of Public Health began to recruit Native Hawaiians. The School of Social Work with Myron Pinky Thompson and now Noreen Mokuau started its disadvantaged minority recruitment program. Papa Ola Lokahi is a Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program. Of course, the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Systems in 1985 with Eola Mau, the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Act, and Papa Ola Lokahi containing representatives from Aluli, Eola Mau, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, State Department of Hawaiian Health, and the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Also, he helped work with the Kahuna La'au Lapa'au. Still, as Kalama pointed out, there's still so much to do. He wanted us to do more research in health needs. He wanted us to really help solidify what it would be that would help our people move forward as far as health was concerned. And I think one of our leaders that I haven't mentioned yet is Dr. Nalina Andrade, who's also working on that. He wanted to decrease our cardiovascular risk and really admired Dr. Aluli for his work on the Molokai diet. And he really was concerned about obesity and diabetes among our people and truly taught, along with the whole family on Molokai, that eating was a sacred ritual. It was a connection with our ancestors. And if we could follow the Native Hawaiian diet, we'd be healthier people. So yes, we're fulfilling his vision. I mean, Imai Winchester is fulfilling his vision. Noi Kaupua was someone he singled out from her Kamehameha School's class. He's reached out to many of us to fulfill his vision. And yes, we are. And thank you to Kim and Papa Ola Lokahi and everyone here. And yes, as Kalama said, we have more to do. Thank you.
Wow, what a great way to end, Nālani. That was actually going to lead into my sort of last question. So I'm going to give the other panelists a chance to add to it, which is really, what was Kekuni's vision of Hawaiian well-being? And I think in what you just shared with us from his, it was kind of laid out right there. But I'm gonna ask the other three panelists at this point if they want to add to that vision of well-being for our people. I mean, we've talked about it in various ways already on this, but if there's any other final thoughts or messages or points that maybe you wanted to emphasize or.
I think Nālani said it well. It's hard to follow.
I know it's hard to beat that, yeah.
It's hard to beat Papa Kekuni's own words.
Yeah.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Emmett. Yeah.
So I think for me personally, is never really been able to kind of like get into discussion with Kekuni about how best to take care of our families, our nation, our communities, and you know, never really was able to look at how we could do it stepwise. You know, I was always thinking that if we got a nation recognized by the feds, then we can start doing that work. But some of the thoughts was, if we're
Emmett, just a second. We need to unmute you again.
okay, sorry, because there's too many, I think, people who are trying to Zoom on Molokai. We have limited opportunity. Our systems don't work here. But anyway, I'm just saying, some of the things that I've never was able to kind of get into discussion with Kekuni was nationhood, recognition from a kingdom perspective, reestablishing it to kind of like being recognized federally. Yeah, so how best can we do it without that either or? You know, that's what I really missed, not getting that directive. You know, because it was hard. It was hard, and then Kekuni kept on having strokes, and it was hard to communicate. But anyway, I guess that's the thing we got to work at now. How best to care for our communities in memory of Kekuni. Mahalo.
Thanks, Emmett. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else?
I appreciated what Kalama had shared, because I feel the same way. Well, there are many challenges our people face health-wise, socioeconomically, but I think over the past 30, 40 years, the cultural renaissance and revival, we're much stronger as a lāhui and a people in being Kanaka Maoli, being Hawaiian, and taking a stand like on the Mauna. But I think a very key to the full health and well-being of our people will have to be the mantle of reconciling, restoring our ea, restoring our own destiny to rule and govern ourselves as a people. And I think he knew that real early on, and the challenges. And I still am a firm believer in that as well. And the reason why is that we know that the current system has its limitations. We can have all the Native Hawaiian scholars and so forth, but you know, Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders are the most vulnerable in our own homeland, and that should never be the case. And so you can come up with we can come up with all the technology and the graces of being a good doctor or clinician, but eventually we will have to tackle the big issues of systemic institutional racism and political disempowerment, which oppresses us. And so the only solution to that is restoration of our ea, our sovereignty, our self-determination, and that path. So I concur with Emmett. Yeah, that's the next frontier for health and well-being.
Sounds like a challenge and a charge straight from Kekuni's own mouth to all of us. You know, it's been a really, I think for me, just listening to you all, a very inspiring a session. I know that there are certain words that kind of popped out to me as I was listening to you all talking about Kekuni, and that really, he was a trailblazer, an inspiration to many of us. He wasn't afraid to advocate for issues that were outside of medicine, where he was originally trained, and he wasn't afraid to go into other arenas and advocate for our people. And a lot of it was all in the name of love, love for us all. And he was a very strong, very bought into the idea of this holistic vision of health, which really, like Kamanaʻo shared, has to do with our social determinants of health, our cultural determinants. Everything is wrapped up in this holistic vision of well-being. He was an incredible scientist, well-respected because of that. He didn't just say things, he only said things if he could back it up. And that's where a lot of that respect came from. And I think he was an incredible role model for us. So I think knowing that we still have work ahead of us, a lot of work ahead of us, we've made a lot of strides, but there's still more to do, that we have this man who has been around to show us the way. And as you can tell from the thoughts and emotions and feelings that were shared this evening, he's still very much a part of us, very much a part of our lāhui. And I know he's still, we're standing on his shoulders, and I think he's still pushing us to rise and keep doing the work that needs to be done. And I just, at least for me, I want to just end by saying I'm just really, I think one of the things I'm really grateful for is seeing what's coming up behind us, the generation behind us. And they may not have ever met Kekuni, and they may have only heard his name, or maybe not even have heard his name, but Kekuni touched us and we're touching them, and his legacy will go on. And I'm just so grateful to celebrate this incredible, tremendous Kanaka. So Thank you all for sharing. Yes, thank you. And thank you for your patience with us going over time. But I think this was really important things that we needed to share with us. So mahalo nui. I'd like to hand it over to the hosts of this session to kind of wrap it up and share any additional news with us on future events. So mahalo to all of you. Mahalo, Dr. Aluli, mahalo, Dr. Crabbe, mahalo, Dr. Nīheu, and mahalo, Dr. Blaisdell-Brennan for your incredible insight and time.
Indeed.
Mahalo,
Mahalo.
Martina.
Mahalo, Dr. Kamaka, Martina. Nice moderation. I would like to remind folks that are listening in that this is the first of a two-part series. We'll be back at Hale Kaohinani next Thursday evening. We have a different panel assembled, and we'll be talking about the future of Hawaiian health and what does it take to create, as we look forward, how can we fulfill Kekuni's vision of Hawaiian well-being and take it into the future. And we'll be talking to folks from some of the organizations that he helped to establish and take his vision into a future direction. So that's what we have ahead. Thank you so much to La Hoʻihoʻi Ea for allowing us to bring in this esteemed panel of presenters. And now I turn it back to Imai.
Mahalo to all of our panelists tonight. Martina, Kamaka, Kalamaokaʻāina, Nīheu, Kamanaʻopono, Crabbe, Noa, Emmett, Aluli, and of course, Nālani, Blaisdell-Brennan. And thank you to you, Kim, for including us. Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea. It's a very important topic, this moment to pause and to honor the living breath of Kekuni, who shares that honi with each and every one of us. And through that exchange of breath, he transforms into the kino lāhui we represent. And likewise, as we share our breath with the next generation, he will live on. I also believe and I concur that the true medicine, the lāʻulapa'au that will cure us of all of our ails is restoration of our ea, mind, body, spirit, social, political, economic, the restoration of our land, the restoration of our waters, the restoration of our consciousness, the purging of all the colonial, capitalistic, imperialistic heva that doesn't belong in our system, because the conditions that we continue to live in today only reflect the evidence that it is poison for our people. And so today we reclaim, I believe, the discussion, we reclaim our determination, our aspirations, and we honor a very important patriot, a very important member of our community who inspired many people. And so I have a lot of gratitude and thanks for all of our panelists tonight for spending this time to bring these old memories of Kauka back at Hale Kaohinani. For those of you who may not know, Hale Kaohinani is the name of of his Hale, where he lived in Nu'uanu off Dowsett Ave. Take a lefty up the kind, right across the bridge. And one of the things that I remember about Kekuni, just to kind of close it off, was, and as we end our night, was that you could never leave Kekuni's presence without a picture. Yeah. And so one of the things that's very important for us is to continue that tradition. Take a picture with your family, show how strong we are, show everything that we've done. It's evidence, it's data, it's research. And again, as we leave Hale Kaohinani, please pick that metaphorical puakeni from Anake on your way out. Give it a good hone, take a couple extra for your car like we used to. But mahalo once again on behalf of Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea and all of our honorees who have spent time at Rebel headquarters at the house Kaohinani. Mahalo again to everybody for joining us this evening. We hope that you guys have been inspired by some of the words that you've heard. We hope that you guys aspire to be our warrior healers, our servers, our teachers, just going to carry our people into the future lāhui that we need for each other. So mahalo once again on behalf of Kala Hoʻihoʻi Ea, e mau ke ea o ka ʻaina i ka pono. Aloha.
Yo, mahalo.